Welcome to NTD Evening News. Our top story tonight: California is suing the Trump administration. Governor Gavin Newsom and the state's attorney general are accusing President Trump and Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth of overstepping their authority when they deployed the California National Guard amid riots in Los Angeles. David Lamb with more on this lawsuit. Civil rights and labor leaders are rallying today in LA, demanding the release of a union leader arrested in a federal immigration raid. This comes after a weekend of protests and violence. Christina Corona brings us there. President Trump doubling down on National Guard deployment while calling violent protesters professional agitators. A White House official confirming that 500 active duty U.S. Marines will be deployed to assist in LA. Iris Tao brings us the latest, plus how the president is responding to the lawsuit from Governor Newsom. New travel bans took effect today, and citizens from a dozen countries are now barred from entering the U.S. President Trump citing national security and public safety concerns. House Speaker Mike Johnson downplays Elon Musk's influence on the big budget bill. He says Republican lawmakers have gotten almost no calls refuting the bill. Melina Weiskup reports.
This is NTD Evening News, live from our global headquarters in New York City. Here's Tiffany Meyer.
Good evening, and thank you for joining us tonight. Lawmakers on Capitol Hill have been divided in their response to the unrest in LA. Our Washington correspondent Luis Eduardo Martinez has the details.
Lawmakers are divided across party lines with regards to the violent protests in LA over the weekend, with some lawmakers taking aim at the administration.
The President of the United States is a cruel, dishonorable human being who would just assume they shoot somebody down. But I don't want that to happen. I want the elected officials to do everything that we can to dissuade them from what they're doing.
For Democrats, the issue is the right to protest government actions, while for Republicans, it's about upholding the law.
Well, let's be clear. Anybody who interferes with the ability of law enforcement to do their job should be arrested and prosecuted. It is a violation of federal and state law.
People are going to protest because they're angry about the situation, and we have to just reiterate to people to do it peacefully, to make sure not to any violence. We absolutely condemn any violence.
Republicans have defended the administration for taking swift action to deploy the National Guard to assist local law enforcement in restoring order. Democrats, on the other hand, have accused the president of using his power to punish state and local officials who disagree with the administration.
And I don't know why a governor would want to try to protect illegal activity inside his state. And the president has made it very clear. If the governor or the mayor of the city isn't willing to protect the citizens of his state or the city, then the president will.
This administration is so vindictive that if you don't support them, or you speak out against them, or go through the court system to hold them accountable to the Constitution, that they're willing to defund an entire state and to hurt everyone in that state and to hurt the whole country is really outrageous.
With election season ramping up for next year's midterm elections, gubernatorial hopefuls are making their pitch.
The President of the United States, for the first time since 1965, order the National Guard in to a state without a request from the governor. You understand just what's on the line in this election.
It's worth noting that in 1992, then President H.W. Bush federalized the National Guard of California in response to the Rodney King riots. And in 2005, President George W. Bush sent federal troops to restore order in Louisiana after Hurricane Katrina. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Luis Eduardo Martinez, NTD News.
President Trump doubling down on deploying the National Guard despite the California governor's objection. The president says he has no choice but to quell what could have turned into an insurrection. And a White House official confirms that 500 U.S. Marines have been deployed to assist in Los Angeles. NTD's White House correspondent Iris Tao has more.
A senior Trump administration official confirmed to NTD on Monday that 500 active duty U.S. Marines have been deployed from Camp Pendleton in Southern California to Los Angeles, that to help protect federal agents as well as federal buildings. The White House says that's in response to increased threats against federal agents and buildings, and it comes as President Trump says his intelligence team believes that behind those violent protests are professional agitators.
What does your intel tell you about these people causing all the problems in LA? The people that are causing the problem are professional agitators. They're insurrectionists. They're bad people. They should be in jail.
Over the weekend, President Trump deployed around 2,000 National Guards, overriding California Governor Gavin Newsom's objection. While Trump is the first president to do so without the governor's consent in about 60 years, he defended the move on Monday, saying he had to do so because Democratic leaders there are not doing enough to quell the protests.
We're lucky we did this because they were overwhelmed. But you have a governor who let the city burn down.
Governor Newsom on Monday sued the Trump administration, arguing that Trump overstepped his authority and violated the Constitution. And Trump, meanwhile, says he had no choice.
I feel we had no choice. I watched Minneapolis burn. Look at what happened in so many different parts of California. We want to be nice to the criminal. And what you're doing is destroying the fabric of our life in this country.
While calling violent protesters insurrectionists, President Trump says he won't call the situation in Los Angeles an insurrection yet, although he says it could have led to one. Unless Trump invokes the Insurrection Act, U.S. military cannot perform law enforcement duties inside the U.S.
It's now heading in the right direction, and we hope to have the support of Gavin.
In other news, U.S. and China held their second round of trade talks on Monday in London. Trump says he's getting good reports as the two teams will continue talking on Tuesday.
China has been ripping off the United States for many years. Nobody charged them 10 cents.
And Trump was speaking at a roundtable to promote what his administration calls Trump accounts, which would give every American newborn an $1,000 investment account that their parents can keep putting money into while deferring tax. The policy is part of Trump's big, beautiful bill that he's trying to get Senate to pass, and the White House says this move would give American children a financial head start. Reporting from the White House, Iris Tao, NTD News.
Does President Trump have the constitutional authority to send in the National Guard? Hear analysis from Republican Congressman Mark Amodei of Nevada. Stay tuned to NTD for a Capitol Report with Steve Lance at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. Tensions are rising in downtown Los Angeles as protests over immigration enforcement stretch into a fourth day. Demonstrators are demanding the release of a union leader arrested during an ICE operation last week. NTD's Christina Corona tells us more from Los Angeles.
We're here in downtown Los Angeles at Grand Park, where hundreds of anti-ICE protesters are demanding the release of union leader David Huerta. Now, Huerta was taken into federal custody during an immigration raid on Friday.
Our brother David Huerta was taken into custody because he did what he has been doing for decades, standing up for immigrants in this city and across this state and across this country.
Huerta was expected to appear at the Roybal Federal Building at 1:30 Pacific Time this afternoon. This comes after multiple ICE raids across Los Angeles County over the weekend, which sparked violent clashes between protesters, the National Guard, and local police. A spokesperson for the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department says 42 people were arrested in a joint operation with the LASD, LAPD, and California Highway Patrol. LAPD Officer Madison confirmed the number and said charges range from failure to disperse to assault with a deadly weapon on a peace officer, looting, and arson. President Trump commented on the situation after deploying 2,000 National Guardsmen to Los Angeles.
Some of the things you're reading about in Los Angeles, thank goodness we sent out some wonderful National Guard. They've really helped, and a lot of problems they were having out there. They were afraid to do anything, and we sent out the troops, and they've done a fantastic job.
The rally remained peaceful throughout the morning at the park. While the National Guard was not stationed inside, they've been spotted along city streets where tensions are rising. A small group of protesters are currently blocking Alameda Street near Temple Street in downtown Los Angeles. According to a U.S. official, 500 Marines from the Marine Corps Air Ground Combat Center, based in 29 Palms, have been officially directed to deploy to Los Angeles in response to immigration protests.
Officials say that up to 500 Marines are on standby and ready to deploy if needed. Reporting from downtown Los Angeles, Christina Corona, NTD News.
President Trump's travel ban went into effect a minute after midnight last night. It bans citizens from 12 countries from entering the U.S. and imposes travel restrictions on 7 others. In a social media video, Trump connected the new travel ban to the recent firebomb attack in Boulder, Colorado, warning of the risks posed by individuals who overstay their visas. He said the measure will protect national security and ensure public safety. The policy does not have an end date. The ban does not revoke existing visas issued to people from the list of countries, and those holding valid visas should still be allowed to enter the U.S. during the travel ban. Does Elon Musk's criticism of the GOP's big budget bill hold enough sway to kill it? House Speaker Mike Johnson says Musk's opinion isn't resonating as much as some might suggest. NTD's Melina Weisskopf reports.
Amid concerns that Elon Musk's calls to kill the bill would ramp up public criticism of the GOP's budget bill, House Speaker Mike Johnson said Republican lawmakers have got almost no calls to the offices to oppose it. Musk recently floated the idea of creating a third major political party. And amid concerns that Musk would try to use funding to primary GOP bill supporters, Johnson brushed off the threat.
Well, I think it'd be a big mistake. I think Elon knows at the end of the day, the reason he got involved to help President Trump win and to help Republicans win the majority in the House and the Senate is because he understands that our policies are better for human flourishing, they're better for the U.S. economy.
There are still others who remain concerned about the bill's deficit spending.
And if we just pass this, if it's a one and done, we will not be really addressing the major problem here in terms of massive growing deficits and debt.
To win over support from skeptics like this, Speaker Johnson is quickly moving a DOJ spending cut bill known as a rescissions package to the House floor this week. The first action would claw back $9 billion in foreign aid and public broadcasting funding. The process Republicans hope to use would allow funding for a number of Biden-era programs to be cut with a simple majority vote, meaning Democrat votes won't be needed in the Senate. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Melina Weisskopf, NTD News.
Coming up, Israeli forces intercept a boat carrying activists headed to the Gaza Strip. Israel says the passengers will be returned to their home countries as soon as possible. Jason Perry reports. The largest prisoner swap between Russia and Ukraine since the start of the war is underway. Both sides say they successfully completed the first round today. Aaron Posdar has emotional moments as soldiers return home and see their families after the break. Welcome back. I'm Tiffany Meyer. Israeli forces say they've intercepted a boat carrying activists headed to the Gaza Strip. Israel says they detained the passengers and will return them to their home countries as soon as possible. NTD's Jason Perry has the story.
Right above our heads. In a video shared on Monday, an activist on board a boat headed to the Gaza Strip complained of a white substance seen on the boat shortly before Israeli forces intercepted the vessel.
We don't know what this is, if this is paint or some chemical. No idea, but please sound the alarm.
12 activists on board the boat said they hope to break Israel's sea blockade on the Gaza Strip and deliver aid to people in the territory. However, when their boat approached the Gaza Strip, the Israeli Navy delivered a message to them telling them the maritime zone off the coast of Gaza was closed to naval traffic.
If you wish to deliver humanitarian aid to the Gaza Strip, you are able to do so through the port of Ashdod via the established channels and distribution centers.
Israeli forces then took control of the boat and instructed the passengers to get rid of their phones. Soon after, Israeli service members were seen giving them sandwiches and bottled water. Israel's defense minister, Israel Katz, said he ordered the military to show the activists a video of the horrific scenes from the October 7th massacre and the atrocities committed by Hamas.
The acts of horror committed against women, the elderly and children, who Israel is fighting for its defense. The IDF will continue its war against Hamas's murderers with all moral righteousness until its surrender, the release of all hostages, and the security of the State of Israel's security.
Israel's government spokesman, David Mencer, said the aid on the boat was less than a single truck's worth of aid, but it will be sent into Gaza.
For some context, as a comparison, in the last 2 weeks,
alone, Israel has facilitated more than 1,200 trucks, 1,200 trucks laden with aid to enter Gaza.
He also said the activists will be returned home to their home countries as soon as possible. Meanwhile, the family members of hostages still held in the Gaza Strip rallied in Tel Aviv on Monday, and they called for a deal to release the remaining hostages.
The Israeli people want the hostages back home. They want to end the war. They want the soldiers back home alive.
There are still 55 hostages remaining in the Gaza Strip, fewer than half of whom are believed to still be alive. Jason Perry, NTD News.
And a spokesperson from Iran's foreign ministry says Tehran will soon hand a counter-proposal for a nuclear deal to the U.S. via Oman. That's in response to a U.S. offer presented in late May that Iran deems, quote, unacceptable. Russia and Ukraine successfully complete the first round of a major POW swap. Once the entire exchange is completed, it will be the largest since the start of the war. NTD's international correspondent Arian Pozdar has the Ukraine update.
The largest prisoner swap between Russia and Ukraine started on Monday. Emotional Ukrainian soldiers reunited with their families after arriving back home by bus. One of them called his mother as soon as he was back in Ukraine.
Hello, Mama. Hello, Mom. I have arrived. I am back in our homeland. Thank you so much for everything, for all your letters. I love you. I cannot wait to see you.
And emotions also ran high on the Russian side. Around 600 Russian soldiers arrived back home on Monday.
We hope everything ends soon. Victory will be ours, and everyone will come back home to relatives.
Russia and Ukraine agreed to the swap during talks in Istanbul last week. They struck a deal to exchange all seriously wounded and all soldiers between the ages of 18 and 25. Both sides agreed to exchange at least 1,200 prisoners of war. This would be the biggest swap since the start of the conflict. Now, Monday's exchange was only the first step in this major swap agreed to last week. Kiev says the swap will take place over several stages in the next coming days. But over the weekend, both sides have been accusing each other of trying to delay the process. And on Monday, Russia again suggested that it doesn't think Ukraine is serious about the process. Watch.
The Russian Federation always fulfills the agreements that were reached, which cannot be said about the Ukrainian side. We have seen and heard 100 different excuses, justifications, and so on.
Although the first round of the swap is complete, there are still more to come. Part of the agreement is also to exchange the bodies of soldiers who died. Russia released this footage, saying it is ready for the swap. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky denied the claims that Kiev is delaying the process. On Monday, he said that the Ukrainian side can't give specific updates on the situation.
The exchange is expected to continue for more than one day. The details of the process are quite sensitive. That's why there is currently less information than usual.
It's not clear when the swap is scheduled to finish. Both sides previously said that the next step would be to arrange a meeting between Zelensky and Russian President Vladimir Putin. Arian Pastar, NTD News.
Coming up, California is suing the Trump administration for deploying the National Guard amid the LA riots. Under what circumstances can a president activate the military over unrest? And are the riots the result of professional agitators, as President Trump suggested? Two analysts joins us to discuss. And COVID-19 cases in China have more than doubled in a month, according to official data. But locals are reporting an even more serious situation. Jason Blair brings us that report when we return. Welcome back. I'm Tiffany Meyer. More on the protests turned riots. California's governor and attorney general are suing the Trump administration for deploying the National Guard. NTD's David Lamb has the details of the lawsuit.
Starting off the week, California officials are asking a federal court to block President Trump's recent order, which aims to quell protests in Los Angeles.
In the early hours of Sunday morning, President Trump and Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth unlawfully federalized 2,000 California National Guard troops for 60 days with no indication as to when they intend to stand down.
That was Attorney General Rob Bonta in a virtual press conference. According to the lawsuit, Governor Gavin Newsom and Bonta argue that the federal government has overstepped its authority and bypassed the governor's approval to take over a unit of the California National Guard. In a recent post on X, Newsom said Trump is, quote, creating fear and terror. Bonta says conditions for a National Guard deployment are when there's an invasion from armed foreign individuals or a rebellion to overthrow leadership. They say federal intervention was not needed and the situation doesn't meet the criteria for federalization. The lawsuit seeks to invalidate Trump's order. The Attorney General also has a message for the rioters.
What we see sometimes is outside folks not interested in the underlying substantive issues that are leading to the protests that are being called out and where change is being sought. They sometimes embed themselves or use the protests as cover for chaotic, harmful, destructive, and criminal actions. And that is wrong. Follow the law. If you don't follow the law, we will find you and we will come for you and we will hold you accountable.
The White House says that incidents of violence and disorder have occurred and threatened immigration enforcement, which constitute a form of rebellion against the U.S. government. David Lamb, NTD News, California.
And we now have confirmation from the Defense Department that more troops will be sent to L.A. Joining us now to discuss is national security analyst Armen Kurdian. He's a retired U.S. Navy captain. And Attorney Gerard Filitti. He specializes in national security law and policy and counterterrorism. Good to have you both with us. Armen, starting with you, the U.S. Northern Command confirmed that roughly 700 Marines are ready to deploy. That's on top of the 300 National Guard troops sent last night. What can we expect from these Marines on the ground?
Good afternoon, Tiffany. These Marines are going to be placed into areas where they're going to perform protective services. So I very seriously doubt they're going to be involved in any law enforcement action. So protection of federal buildings, protection of federal agencies, perhaps other areas where folks have continued to attack and assault. So placing them on federal property. I think this could also have been done with National Guard troops as well. But I think the deployment of the Marines is more of a political message from the federal government. Say, hey, we're not going to stand for this. And that we're tired of the states flaunting immigration laws, immigration rules, and not cooperating to remove the worst of the worst from our cities and our neighborhoods. So I think that's the main reason why we're sending these Marines from Pendleton. But the bottom line is these are riots. And 30 years ago, during the Rodney King riots, you had over about 55, 60 people killed during those riots, and the president's trying to prevent that from happening now.
And Gerard, on that note, critics are calling Trump's activation of the military unlawful. But as Armen mentioned briefly there, during the 1992 LA riots, then President George H.W. Bush also mobilized the National Guard, Army, and Marines to stop those riots. Given that, under what circumstances can a president activate the military over unrest?
Well, the president has the discretion, has the legal authority to activate the National Guard, to federalize a state's National Guard. And as Donald Trump has suggested, he can also invoke the Insurrection Act, which you would almost certainly need to do if you're putting in active duty Marines in Los Angeles, in the city, because there is also federal law that prohibits using military as law enforcement or in that capacity. So either the Marines and National Guard have very, very well-detailed orders that prevent them from executing a lot of things other than providing force protection for law enforcement, or President Trump will have to embrace more use of executive authority. Ultimately, the president can use the National Guard, can use the military to enforce federal law or suppress a rebellion against federal authority in a state, or to protect a group of people whose civil rights are being threatened. This is something that he can do without a state governor's permission, so he really doesn't need Governor Newsom to sign off, although that is what is customarily the choice when you're looking at political optics.
And Armen, when it comes to the rioting, we're seeing videos of people burning American flags, cars set on fire, buildings defaced with phrases like "death to America," with some agitators employing the same tactics as Antifa. Is what we're seeing the result of left-wing radicalism run amok?
That's a big part of it. California Attorney General Bonta is correct. I'm sure there's a lot of agitators and foreign actors who are basically egging this on. But at the same time, I found his words rather soft, and the fact that he's going after the Trump administration for bringing in more law enforcement to try to stop this from happening by being serious about going after those agitators and bringing order to these neighborhoods and these store owners, shopkeepers, and homeowners that are being terrorized right now by these riots, I think is display of a massive cognitive dissonance for what's actually happening. So absolutely, we need to get these troops in there. And if the Attorney General is serious about bringing order, then maybe if they were to cooperate with the federal government to bring order and restore order to the streets, then perhaps these riots would be over much more quickly than we're seeing them end right now.
And Gerard, in the legal realm, we are seeing the state issue a lawsuit against the Trump administration for deploying the National Guard. Can the administration legally arrest the governor, or as California's AG is arguing, states have rights?
I think states absolutely have rights. The 10th Amendment is an impediment to the federal government doing whatever it can or wants to with regard to the states. Can the Trump administration, can Donald Trump arrest Governor Newsom? Sure, if he is breaking the law, if he is breaking the law to a federal law, in prohibiting the enforcement of federal law. There are ways that can happen. Can he arrest him merely for refusing to allow the National Guard to be mobilized? No. There has to be a crime, there has to be an obstruction, there has to be something far more serious that Governor Newsom is engaged in. And ultimately, what we're seeing is a confluence of factors. We've seen this is the consequence of having permissive sanctuary city and sanctuary state policies, which entitle people to thumb their noses at law enforcement when it comes to immigration and forces. Add to that a year and a half of protests, anti-Jewish protests on city streets across America, and you have a public scene where you have people engaging in far beyond what's protected First Amendment protest and into violent and aggressive protests that are radicalized. That these are a danger to law enforcement and a danger to the public. So inaction by Governor Newsom, inaction by the mayor of Los Angeles, Karen Bass, inaction by progressive elected officials has led to this point where we're seeing aggressive, violent insurrections against authority, and instead of calming things down, instead of actually enforcing the law, the governor of California is essentially saying we're not going to do anything, and it's Donald Trump's fault for mobilizing the Guard to protect Americans.
And on that note, Armin, zooming out a bit here, we are seeing reports that more protests and unrest is being called for across the nation next weekend during Trump's military parade. What are you anticipating in terms of that, as in what are we likely to see, or what steps could this administration with local law enforcement take to stem some of that?
We're seeing defund the police 2.0, only right now it's on steroids. It's almost a destroy the police kind of effort. You have U.S. Congresswomen Jayapal and Torres who are actively decrying ICE, calling them, get the heck out of, expletive deleted, out of Los Angeles. You had San Diego City Councilman Chana Rivera called them terrorists. You have a candidate in a special election for supervisor in San Diego County taking the sides of these of the unrest and of the rioters, vice immigration and customs enforcement. Look at all these people that have been taken off the streets, these rapists, these drug traffickers, violent offenders, felons, burglars, murderers have been cleaned off the streets and ejected from our country. And the Democrats are arguing against that and are fighting the efforts to remove them from the streets. This is an effort, quite frankly, that the Republicans are going to run on. And just as they were very successful in running on the defund the police previously, they're going to be using this going forward. And this is a major issue for Californians because they want the law enforced. They passed Prop 36 in November to basically prosecute shoplifters that had been been getting off scot-free. And the majority of Californians just want to live quiet, happy lives, safe in their neighborhoods, and a bunch of illegal criminal gangs running through their streets and their neighborhoods is not what they want.
And Gerard, what are you anticipating to see with these planned protests for this upcoming weekend?
Well, I think that what we will see with these protests is a very aggressive nature. We're not looking at people who are merely holding up banners and chanting. They're lighting cars on fire. They're attacking police officers. They're throwing Molotov cocktails. This is precisely why Donald Trump is federalizing the National Guard and using the military to backstop law enforcement, because law enforcement is at risk, because things have escalated to the point that people don't respect law enforcement and lives are in danger. Now, whether or not a court will step in, I'm sure that the Governor Newsom will find a judge to issue an injunction, just as I'm sure that this will be appealed and the injunction will be lifted. Ultimately, this is within the president's purview. And if we continue seeing a escalation in violence, an escalation of bad conduct, then I think courts will be more and more inclined to side with the president that this is a lawful exercise of his authority.
Armin Kurdi and Gerard Filitti, as always, thank you both so much for joining us.
Pleasure, thank you.
As President Trump deploys the National Guard to California, how are people reacting to the riots taking place in Los Angeles? NTD's Sam Wong was out on the National in D.C. to hear from them.
Have you been following what's happening in LA right now with all the unrest that's going on?
Very loosely, but yeah, I've been aware.
What's your reaction to what you're seeing on TV?
I've seen like the one clip, honestly, like 20,000 times. It's that guy throwing something at cars. I really don't think that that's going to accomplish anything. It's not unexpected. I mean, we saw this 5 years ago.
I think it's really sad that people think they have to react that way. You know, everybody has an opinion one way or the other, but we should all still live in respect of one another.
I mean, there's always people that are going to protest, but I was surprised that Trump sent out 1,000 troops so quick, but yeah, it's California.
The protests started in a really peaceful way, and then now people are saying that there were some outside agitators who went in there with the intention of trying to provoke authorities to get a response. What are your thoughts on that?
You know, I mean, from what I've seen, it's been pretty violent. They were throwing stuff at police, and I don't accept that at any point.
I think there's always going to be people like that, no matter what the protest is about. I mean, I saw it here with my own eyes on January 6th. There's some people that will need to be obviously policed, but it doesn't need to be the whole crowd, right?
Well, I would say it's probably happened before, so I have no doubt about it happening now. When they were getting the load of bricks all ready to go, and they knew ahead of time, planning it out, yeah.
I don't know, but we call it rent-a-mob, and we have opinions of who's funding them, but I won't say today.
What do you make of President Trump's decision to send in the National Guards?
Well, a former National Guard here just got out. I think it's just a show force. No, I wouldn't take that too seriously, to be honest. Our armed forces are not to be used against our own citizenry. We have a police force. They should be used for police actions. If there's military action that's necessary on the United States, it's because we're invaded by a hostile nation.
If people aren't following the law and they're rioting and creating mayhem, I don't see a problem with it.
Some of the reactions to President Trump's actions of deploying the troops is ridiculous, because if he wasn't doing anything, then they would be mad at him for not protecting the citizens.
COVID-19 cases in China rose 160% in May, according to official data from the Chinese Communist Party. However, residents across China are saying the situation seems to be even more serious based on their daily experiences. NTD correspondent Jason Blair has the update.
441,000 cases of COVID-19, including 600 serious ones and 7 deaths, were reported in China by the communist regime for May. That's a 160% increase from April. Chinese health authorities say the current variant, which is related to Omicron, peaked in May and is showing, quote, a downward trend in some provinces. However, U.S.-based physician and current affairs commentator Tong Jingyan told the Epoch Times that the data for June hasn't been released yet. He says, I think their purpose of saying it is to avoid panic among the public that there will be a larger scale outbreak this summer. This wave of epidemic is still developing. He's also skeptical about China CDC's claim that the treatment drugs are still effective with the new strain. A traditional Chinese medicine physician in China told the Epoch Times he knows people who have died and, quote, the hospitals don't say it is COVID-19 and the Communist Party does not admit it and does not allow hospitals to say it. A resident in Shenzhen told the Epoch Times that he's been seeing long lines at fever clinics. He says the symptoms of the patients are all sore throats, fever, etc., which last for at least more than a week. He also says that even if someone dies, the government will not let people know that he died of this disease. Another resident in Shenzhen told the Epoch Times a higher proportion of children have been infected. Symptoms are generally fever and chills. Doctors don't tell patients what virus it is and ask them to go back to take COVID-19 testing at home. Many people tested positive. The Chinese Communist Party has a long history of releasing unreliable data and covering up information, including arresting a doctor at the start of the COVID-19 pandemic who tried to warn about a new respiratory illness spreading. Currently, the NB181 strain is classified as a, quote, variant under monitoring by the WHO and has been detected in other countries but is currently only dominant in China. Jason Blair, NTD News.
Coming up in tennis, an epic comeback yesterday gives Carlos Alcaraz his second straight French Open title. Dave Martin joins us to discuss after the break. And now for your sports news, we're joined by NTD's Dave Martin. Dave, plenty going on right now, but let's start in the NBA as the Oklahoma City Thunder beat the Indiana Pacers last night to tie the series at 1 game apiece. What seemed to be the difference in last night's game?
Well, I'd say for one thing, the Thunder did not let up after they got a big lead early in last night's win, which I think seemed predictable after they gave up that big lead in Game 1. Now, last night they went on a 19-2 run in the second quarter to blow the game open and pretty much kept the Pacers at arm's length in the entire second half. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander led everyone with 34 points. But I think it was certainly their defensive intensity, certainly in the first half, that really set the tone for the game. Pacers scored just 41 points by halftime. Let's listen to what the coaches said, the players said after the game.
I thought, Indiana's kind of an acquired taste. We haven't played them a ton. They're not in the West, obviously, and they play a very distinct style on both ends. And I thought there were a lot of things tonight that we were just like a little better in and more comfortable. And that was on both ends of the floor. I just thought the guys did a good job of just improving, which is important going from Game 1 to Game 2.
You have to stay focused on the task at hand. Now, whatever that may be for your team and how you want to attack them or go about the game plan, but you have to lock in and stay focused. And even tonight, we've had some moments of slippage. Now, you're not going to be perfect out there ever, but it goes without saying, like, to make it this far into the season, it's going to take supreme level of focus to reach the ultimate goal. And they're a display of that to the highest form. Like, they play a full 48 minutes, and you can't just throw the first punch. You got to try to throw all the punches all night. And, yeah, that's what we did. We threw enough punches tonight to get a W.
So now the series is tied at 1 game apiece. Game 3 will be Wednesday night in Indiana.
Well, looking at women's basketball, WNBA star Caitlin Clark has been sidelined for the past 2 weeks with a quad strain. What is her status for Tuesday night's game?
Yeah, she's going to miss Tuesday night's game as well, according to Indiana head coach Stephanie White. That'll be the 5th straight game she misses. Now, she injured quad back on May 24th against New York. They said at that time they'd expect her to miss about 2 weeks, and it's been 2 weeks since then. Now, actually, in the 4 games she's missed, though, the team's gone 2-2, and they were actually 2-2 with her. So kind of surprising that the fever really have not fallen off yet. Now, after Tuesday, though, their next game will be this Saturday, again against New York. So maybe she goes ahead and returns then, too. Interestingly enough, this is the first time in her pro or college career that Caitlin Clark has missed any kind of games here. So something new for her, for sure.
Shifting gears to tennis news. Yesterday, second-ranked Carlos Alcaraz staged an improbable comeback to win the French Open. What did you make of this match?
I mean, I was stunned. After he dropped the first 2 sets, then wins the next 3 to win the match. That's the first time he's ever done it in his career, and it just takes place at the championship of a Grand Slam final. Now, not only did he come back overall in the match, he had to have a big comeback just in the 4th set to stay alive. Now, he was down 5-3, serving at love 40 against number 1 ranked Jannik Sinner, of course. Somehow saved 3 championship points there. But of course, he's still not out of the hole yet. He still had to break Sinner's serve, win this tiebreak in the 4th set. He also then won the tiebreak in the 5th set to win it. Let's listen to what Alcaraz said after the win.
Well, this one was the most exciting match that I've played so far, without a doubt. Today I think the match had everything. really good moments, really bad moments. Just really happy and proud about how I deal with everything today. I mean, it wasn't easy. The first match that I came back from 2 sets to love down. I think it wasn't a better occasion to do it in the final of a Grand Slam.
It's good to see that we can produce also tennis like this, because I think it's good for the whole movement of tennis and the crowd. It was a good atmosphere today, and also to be part of it, so it's very special. So yeah, of course I'm happy, to be part of this. I would be even more happy if I would have here, the big trophy, but. Yeah, as I said, you can't change it now.
Yeah, so tough loss there, obviously, for Sinner. Now, for Alcaraz, the next Grand Slam here is Wimbledon, where he's actually won the last 2 there. But it looks like we've got a good rivalry now brewing between Alcaraz and Sinner. They've won 7 of the last 8 Grand Slam titles between the 2 of them.
Rising stars right there, then. Moving to NHL news tonight is Game 3 of the Stanley Cup Finals, with Edmonton and Florida tied at 1 game apiece. What are you expecting to see in tonight's game?
I mean, hopefully more of what we saw in games 1 and 2, which were both overtime thrillers. Now, Edmonton won game 1, and Florida rebounded to win game 2 Friday night in double overtime. Now, one thing to watch for tonight is the status of Edmonton's Ryan Nugent-Hopkins. Now, he did not practice yesterday because of an undisclosed injury. It looks like it's going to be a game-time decision tonight. Of course, Ryan Nugent-Hopkins, he's the left winger on their front line, along with center Connor McDavid. He's also on their power play unit. So it obviously will be a significant loss if he's out for tonight's game. So tonight's game, though, Game 3 will be played in Florida starting at 8:30 p.m. Eastern Time tonight.
So coming up
very soon.
Well, Dave, as always, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Tiff.
And that's all for today's news. For round-the-clock coverage, visit us at ntd.com/live or download our NTD app. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Tiffany Meyer. Good night.